George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
He says she's a communist. She says he's a fascist. Is this the most stupid American presidential election since, well, the last one? And Blinken just arrived in Tel Aviv. We all know what that usually means. The ceasefire talks, as they are laughingly described, have broken down. And it looks like the answer to the question on our poll is indubitably yes. And thousands of Ukrainians have paid the ultimate price for the madcap charge of the Life Brigade into Kursk, into Russian territory. And David Lammy was kept waiting for Godot forever when Netanyahu refused to meet him. Not because he's the Idi Amin of British politics, not because he hasn't earned all the money the Israel lobby has given him, but because, well, apparently Netanyahu doesn't think that Starmer and Lammy have supported the genocide enthusiastically enough. You couldn't make it up. You don't have to. You can hear the truth here on the mother of all talk shows. Fasten your seatbelts.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Sorry about the garb. I'm in a faraway place where it's very, 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 very hot. Now, he says she is a communist. When I first read the allegation that Karma Chameleon Harris was a communist, I laughed out loud and I put it down to the lunatic fringe, the far shores of American far-right MAGA politics. I could not believe that a sentient being could imagine that the Democrats were fielding a communist in this election. But now Donald Trump is saying it. He's just issued a meme which has her addressing the DNC in Chicago, and the big screen is a red flag with a hammer and sickle. These people, the Democrats, are the head of the snake of the United Snakes of America. There's no country they haven't invaded in the interests of finance capital, in the interests of American hegemony. There is no war that they haven't been prepared to fight, no South Asian population that they haven't been prepared to mutilate, decimate, and all but destroy. There is no ploy to weaken and divide Russia, to isolate and potentially defeat China that they are not prepared, have not been prepared to make. And there are people in America think they're communists. They think that Harris is a communist. And of course, on the other side of the coin, the Democrats who say democracy is on the ballot have spent the entire week trying to keep Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party off the ballot. Put democracy on the ballot, but keep other people off the ballot. Spend any money, employ any lawyers, deploy any battery of obscene, grotesque arguments, legal arguments, but keep other people off the ballot. She calls Donald Trump a fascist. How? Why? Didn't you see his 4 years in office? Wallowing in the swamp, the same swamp that you wallow in, Kamala? Didn't you see John Bolton? Didn't you see all those kids in cages at the border? Oh no, they were Obama's kids in cages. And there's now still kids in cages, even though you're the border czar. I suppose the long and the short of it is that it has never been more obvious that the United States is an utterly, entirely dysfunctional country. Now, I feel sorry about that. I have American blood in my veins, as many of you already know. I'm going there next month. I love the country from sea to shining sea. I love its can-do spirit. I love its majesty, its size, its variety. But in the end, it's their business. If they want to choose between Laurel or Hardy, if they want to choose between Mutt or Jeff, if they want to choose between Dr. Jekyll or Mrs. Hyde, that is their affair. My problem is that my country and the European countries are still on their knees in thrall to an American empire that is so clearly headed for the knacker's yard. A blind man could see it, but not in the chanceries of Europe, not in Downing Street, not in the Elysee, not in wherever the Reich sits nowadays in Germany. For them, it's business as usual. What does America want? Let's do it with gusto. Blinken has just arrived in Tel Aviv in the last hour. In the last 11 months, that has normally meant an uptick in the frenzy of genocidal violence dealt out to the prisoners behind the wire in the cage of the Gaza Strip. And there's no reason to believe that that's not what's going to happen this time. The Israelis are frenziedly attacking Gaza like it was the first day. Definitely not like it's the last day. And they're no longer even pretending. I thought the Iranians were waiting until the outcome of the talks on the 15th, but it's already the 18th. The talks are going nowhere. There is no ceasefire. There is no peace process. There is only war. So you might as well get on with the war, mightn't you? Although I warn you, it won't be a small war. I warn you that the worm has turned, that the empire can now strike back at the metropolis, that the natives are heavily armed, extremely restless, and their people are ready to face you. The so-called peace talks, which were really a means by which America tried to get Netanyahu to put some lipstick on his pig, to give them some kind of breakthrough that they could package as a ceasefire for 1 week. The UN just asked Israel for a ceasefire for 1 week so that they could inoculate all the children in Gaza for polio. Polio is now back. I was going to say on the streets of Gaza, but there are no streets left. Amongst the rubble, in the wreckage, in the stinking cemetery that Gaza has become, polio is now rampant. Now, Israel said no. Now, I'm no lawyer, but if that's not genocide, I don't know what would be genocide. It's also incredibly stupid to imagine that polio will be stopped by a barbed wire fence around a concentration camp. It's incredibly stupid to think that you can keep these diseases in the ghetto that you have erected and thrown millions of people behind. So look out for polio in Tel Aviv. Look out for polio in Haifa. You think polio can be restricted behind wire? You idiots. But the 1 week ceasefire was not allowed. A 6 week ceasefire was not allowed. But a 1 week or a 6 week ceasefire will change nothing at all. Will merely mean that the genocide will begin again and again and again, as it has done for more than 75 years. The truth is, Israel is like that famous surgeon that cannot operate on his own foot. It is a practical impossibility. Israel will not solve this problem. Those who made Israel, who keep Israel, who arm it, fund it, shill for it, protect it in every international fora, including the Olympic Games, they are the people who are going to have to operate on the gangrenous foot that is the Israeli occupation of Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the illegally annexed territory of the Golan Heights. And as long as Washington says no, Europe will continue to say no. So no one is going to perform that operation. So gangrenous poison will do what gangrenous poison does. Continue to infect, to continue to inflame. And the flames are about to burst still higher. It is becoming embarrassing for the Lebanese resistance, for the Yemenis, for the Iraqis, for the Iranians to keeping on waiting. There was every reason. I would have cautioned it, counseled it myself, not to do anything while there was a possibility of a permanent ceasefire and an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, a cessation of the illegal settlement of the West Bank, reining in the gangsters roaming around, heavily armed, torturing, killing, torching, and stealing from the Palestinian people occupied there now since 1967, when the Beatles were still the top of the hit parade. That's how long it's been going. So now that it is not going to happen, what's the reason for, after all the talk and after all the anticipation, holding back any longer? That's why I fully expect that this night or the next night, the long anticipated, awaited retaliation for the gratuitous, cold-blooded murder, most foul, in Tehran and in Beirut will finally fly. And the revenge may very well provoke an Israeli response that Biden just warned the Iranians may include the firing of tactical nuclear warheads at Iran by Israel. That's the nuclear warheads they have never admitted to having, and no one's ever asked to inspect. But if Biden says they're going to fire nuclear weapons, that's the first official recognition by the US that Israel is a nuclear-armed state. Iran's response was steady, was calm, and it was this: whatever Israel fires at us, we will fire back at them. And that's why I keep saying to you that calling this a Middle East war, as our poll does this evening, calling this a regional war, as most commentators call it, is insufficient. Because once war on that scale begins, on top of the world's oil fields, gas fields, the Straits of Hormuz, the Red Sea, to what extent can that be described as a regional war? The economy of Western countries will immediately halt. There'll be no oil. There'll be no goods in the Suez Canal. There will be nothing sailing through the Red Sea. Dubai will no longer exist. Hope you've not bought a flat there. Dubai will be a field of cinders that used to be the towers in the sky built by people with bare feet over this last 50 years or so. These consequences of an all-out war in the Middle East are incalculable, not least because whilst Israel has a big brother called the United States, Iran has two big brothers, and they're bigger than Israel's big brother. Russia and China are bigger than the United States and, who is it? Italy and Holland and Britain. You know, the other brothers of Netanyahu, Gallant, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and the rest. So hold on to your hats. It's going to be a bumpy ride in the Middle East, from which we will be lucky if any of us escape. And if it doesn't happen there, well, it might just happen in Kursk, the very place where the end of the Second World War became discernible, ineluctable, inescapable, unavoidable, may very well turn out to be the place where the Third World War began. This charge of the Light Brigade that Zelensky ordered for cinematic purposes has turned into a thoroughgoing military disaster. Yes, thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have lost their lives. Hundreds of vehicles, hundreds of guns, some of them the most expensive foreign imports, NATO imports that you can possibly buy, even though you don't have to buy them. They're given gratis by the European and North American taxpayers. But the devastation now being wrought, and a very bloody one, on the poor bloody infantry that Zelensky sent in to Kursk, will not just turn out to be a little local military disaster, like the charge of the Light Brigade, the charge of the 600, on and on they rode into the guns until the guns cut them down. No, this is not a little local affair, because the Russian war aims inevitably have now changed. The Russian method of making war with Ukraine has now inevitably changed. The weaponry which Russia has been using against Ukraine must now have changed. Question is, are we, in the failing countries of the West, in which just 13% of the people of the world live, where just 9% of the world's children live, do the maths, are we going to respond to Russia's response? And if we do, are we going to have two world wars running simultaneously in two different parts of the world? And in Britain's case, with a total armed forces that would comfortably fit into a mid-level football stadium. Hold on to your hats, make sure There is a cupboard under the stairs in which you can pretend to shelter from the inevitable storm. In the words of Bob Dylan, a hard rain is going to fall. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire. Okay, the poll is a Middle East war inevitable? Is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the woods? What's the answer to this questioning of the bleeding obvious? Is a Middle East war inevitable? Yes or no? 25,000 people have voted already, and most people seem to think that it is, though as always, the NAFO crowd and the Zionist crowd are showing that they think our polls only run on Twitter. The fools. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland. 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 44203 966 2625. Now, our first guest this evening is one of my all-time favorites. My old friend. Seems so long we've been talking about the same subjects, Garland. We keep trying to get out, but they keep pulling us back in. I don't know where to start, but let me start with the allegation that Kamala Harris is a communist. Does that not sum up the absolutely unhinged nature of American politics?
Yes, it does, and in fact, George, I think it does something else. It shows the commonality in view between the two parties. It exposes the duopoly, because while the Democrats do all of the imperialist stuff worldwide, they go after Venezuela and China and Cuba, the same exact socialist states that the Republicans demonize. The Republicans actually attack the Democrats from the right for using words that imply that there could possibly be problems in the market. Now, we already know that the Democrats have no intentions of addressing any problems in the market, and that's hollow rhetoric. But it allows both parties to create this Overton window where you can only talk about how well the market works or doesn't work, and reiterate that any criticism of the free market libertarian style politics is communism, must be demonized.
Yes, I mean, these are people who think that anyone talking about the right of the American people to free health care, which they allow and pay for in Israel, by the way, the American public and the American Congress gives money to Israel to provide free health care to Israelis, whilst describing the idea of health care for all in the United States as communism. That's the long and the short of it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It in fact is. And also during that speech, Kamala Harris, took a page, took a out of the Republicans' talking points books, a talking points book. One of the things that she said was that she was going to use deregulation to create jobs and to strengthen the economy. So she was using their own language. She went on to say, well, actually, people are saying that she said she was going to address price gouging. I don't really think she knows what it means, because if you listen to the speech, she's actually said price gauging. And I'd never heard of that term before Kamala Harris made it up. So she's going to somehow address a new problem that we have called price gauging that has been interpreted as price gouging. But there's no substance to it. The Biden administration has been in office nearly 4 years. The problems that the American people are facing has been compounding the entire 4 years. And now, 2 months before the election, Kamala Harris has some rhetoric that's going to cure all of those problems that, quite frankly, we all know would never get through Congress, even if she intended to try, which she doesn't.
She, on the other hand, calls him a fascist. In what way is he a fascist? What revolutionary change did he bring to America when he was last in office? What revolutionary change of a fascist variety is he likely to bring if he gets another term? I would have thought he's going to do business as he did it before if he comes back to office.
Well, one of the things that we have is name calling. You're a communist. No, you're a fascist, which are simply the terms that, are acceptable to be used in the context of American politics if you're faking to be the right or faking to be the left. But the fact of the matter is that Kamala Harris doesn't discuss what fascism really is. It's part of a system. It's a systemic problem. So they say he's a fascist as though if Donald Trump comes into power, just his presence alone will create a dynamic where the entire country will turn fascism, but they don't exactly discuss what that term means. And the Biden administration pushed further and further towards, full government control. And as you probably know, you've interviewed Scott Ritter recently, to a dramatic, draconian crackdown on those who dissent against this really sick system that we're experiencing.
Yeah, that was to be my next point. Do they mean by fascism putting journalists behind bars for more tthan a decade in the case of Julian Assange? Do they mean by fascism raiding journalists with the FBI like Scott Ritter? Do they mean operating with their hand up the back, social media platforms to dictate what the rest of us can read, hear, see, and to ghost and strangle those that they don't like? Is that what they mean by fascism?
Well, if you really look into the level of discourse in the liberal world, in the Democratic Party these days, you understand that they don't have to mean anything by it. That it's just become hollow name calling, that it's Trump is a fill in the blank. You make up a name, you throw it at him, and then all of the people around, all of the people in the brainwash cult will repeat that. I mean, if you look at, I've been listening to some of Kamala Harris's speeches lately, and she'll be giving a speech, and during the speech, she'll just say a couple of words at some point. They're fairly meaningless. And the entire crowd will start chanting those words over and over and over without any real meaning or context to the word. So I think at this point that the Democratic Party has successfully, using propaganda, using the intelligence community, has successfully brainwashed their constituents to a point where they don't have to say or do anything substantive. They don't even have to promise them anything anymore. They can simply say, elect us or Donald Trump is going to be in, and terrible things are going to happen. We're not even going to define those, and we're not going to explain to you why the last time he was in, none of those terrible things happened. So we're looking at really a non-substantive party. I'm not saying that the Republicans are much better, but to be quite frank, I think that the Republican Party, there is a foundation there that has a healthy mistrust of government, albeit misguided in the policies that would fix that government, but they have a little bit of a healthier mistrust of government as opposed to the Democratic Party, which really now sees themselves as the protectors of the system. Like, they have convinced their constituency that they are protecting a just system from Donald Trump corrupting this system.
Yeah, if you asked me, if you forced me to choose, I'd say that most of the fascism I'm seeing in the United States is coming from the Democrats, and they want another 4 years, another 8 years, I've no doubt, of cackling Kamala to show it. Now, on the face of it, this operation is successful. I was just looking at a story which swept the world, or a word which swept the world, the word joy. Joyous, joyful. They've got to explain, you see, why Kamala Harris keeps bursting into laughter at the most inappropriate things and the most inappropriate time. So they've called it joy. And I saw newspapers all over the world on the same day, and broadcasts and newspapers in the US, every one of them on the same day started to talk about the joy of the Kamala Harris campaign. This is quite an operation, Garland.
And the great success in the operation is creating a dynamic where people have a discussion about the most superficial things when it comes to politics. That when they discuss about politics, it's about joy, it's about good versus evil, it's about stopping a bad guy versus saving, versus addressing a system. What they've really successfully done is thwarted the discussion about systemic problems. In which people like you and I, we talk about imperialism, we talk about systemic problems. I have people call some of my radio shows and basically imply, Donald Trump's going to take this system out and we've got to save it. And I always say the same thing. I am not the cure for this system. I'm the disease. This system is really terrible. And you make a mistake if you look at this horrific system and somehow feel that you've got to stop it, the deterioration of it, you have to save it, as opposed to looking at this system and saying there's nothing you can do to save it. And in fact, you should look forward to a better world, to creating a system that is more just.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer being pretended, is it, that Joe Biden is running the country? So I'm asking, given the potentially existential issues that I just discussed in my monologue of all-out war in the Middle East, all-out war in the Ukraine, or both of them together, who's in charge of America's response to that? Who decided to send fully 1/3 of the American Navy to the Mediterranean, which is what is there right now?
I think they accidentally tell us when they say, when our media, when our politicians say things like, let the market decide. I think they're really telling us who's in charge, because the market is a metaphor for the oligarchs, for the ruling elite. We've got a lot of Zionist billionaires and Zionist money, and we've got Tony Blinken now, who has returned to his home country. He's returned to the country that he actually works for and represents. And so I think what we're looking at is a government where kind of for those of us who understand what's going on, we can see that Kamala Harris, I mean, how absurd is it that she'd be in charge of anything? And Donald Trump, he better watch flying in small planes. I mean, every time I turn around, there's a bullet whizzing by his head. His plane's got to land because it's having mechanical. I think this guy better take a train or maybe a horse and carriage everywhere he goes, because his life is hanging by a thread right now.
Yeah, absolutely correct. But we are in Queer Street, as we say over here. It's not easy to see a way out of these potentially existential crises that we're in. I'm wondering if, I'm not in Britain at the moment, but I'm wondering if the British people even know it. I'm wondering even more if the American people even know it. Do they?
Absolutely not. And they won't learn it by watching the news. You know, there is some good news amongst all the dark news, and that is that shows like this, that the alternative media is really blossoming right now, and that more and more people are learning what's going on. But the masses in the aggregate have no clue. They're arguing over very, very minor things. I think that in the Middle East, we already have a broader war. The only question is, how does that broader war manifest itself? Does it get to a point where it significantly affects the flow of oil? At which point, if that happens, even if it doesn't, completely blow up where oil is unavailable, but if it gets to a point where there's a significant increase in oil, that will be a wake-up call for people. They'll start asking questions. I can tell you that in America, the one thing that would wake people up would be if they saw, $12, $15, $20 a gallon for oil, they would start asking the questions they need to ask. But as long as they don't feel that kind of pain, they're going to be arguing about, who's a communist and whether Kamala Harris is going to build 3 million houses or something crazy like that.
Or price gauging. Let me go
exactly.
left field, Garland. I want to go left field with you. And I'm sorry I didn't warn you because maybe you didn't see it. But I've been looking at a lot of what appear to be extraterrestrial activities in California. I've been looking at footage that the public have taken of what appears to be, I don't know, maybe alien intelligence has come to watch the world blow itself up. Maybe they've come with a warning, don't do it. We implore you. Maybe they've come to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza. I don't know what. But it looked bizarre to me. Is it a big story in the U.S.?
Well, it's not as big a story as it should be. And I think you make a strong point, and that is, it would be absurd to think that in a universe not of this size, that of infinite size, that we're the only creatures here. So I think it's based on what we've seen over the course of the years when it comes to unidentified objects and et cetera, and unidentified phenomenon. I think it's clear that something's going on. And right now, it makes sense that at a time of such turmoil, at a time when the potential for a nuclear conflict is so high that if there were, which there are, such creatures, that they would be significantly concerned. I will say this, and people can look this up. There have been reports, and these came from the U.S. military over the course of the years, last several years, that there have been unidentified objects, whatever you want to call them, that have flown over nuclear facilities, that have scanned nuclear facilities. And, the leaders that we have in the West are so stupid, they're so insane, they're so suicidal, that maybe the only prayer that we have, which is a sad state of affairs, the only prayer that we have is some little green guys from another country comes down, because they can't be any stupider than these people.
Exactly. Let's vote for them. Garland Nixon, as always, thanks very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Is a Middle East war inevitable? Yes or no? Well, 26,623 of you have voted. Let's get this poll over 30,000. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. I discussed with Mr. Jeremy Corbyn on the telephone, and I have told him that I am now going to announce that I, the Workers' Party, and I believe millions in the country, call on Jeremy Corbyn to launch a British version of the new Popular Front. He may or may not want to form a party himself. Others will remain in their own parties. But he must be the leader of a popular front. He's not a perfect leader, Mr. Corbyn. None of us are perfect leaders, but he is the leader. And he does have a seat in Parliament with which to lead the millions of people who today and increasingly over the next months and years will reject the policy, personalities and direction of a Keir Starmer government. So, Mr. Corbyn, I told you I was going to say these words, and I now formally say them. On behalf of the Workers' Party of Britain, we ask you to lead and unite all the forces of the left, of the radical forces in Britain who reject neoliberalism, who reject endless war, who oppose genocide. Mr. Corbyn, lead us. We will follow you. And I very much hope to hear positive news on that from you by return.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
ET phone MOATS. If you're using an American phone, it's +1 844 944 3344. If you're using a UK or an Irish phone, and no, it sounds unlikely, it's 08081 965522. If you're ringing from the international, the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Now, the MOATS podcast is doing so well. We're #1 in Bahrain. We're number 18 in Mexico. We're in the top 30 in Russia, Peru, Croatia, and in the top 10 in Oman. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code in the corner of your screen right now. Let's go to Massachusetts for the first call of the evening, but on the Middle East. Go ahead, M in Massachusetts.
Oh, hello, Mr. Galloway. It's such a pleasure to finally speak to you. I'm a longtime listener and observer of you and your work, and it's the first time speaking with you, so it's an incredible privilege to me.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and my opinion on the Middle East is the war inevitable? Well, there's aspects of it that are inevitable. But I'd like to stress the issue that it's clearly an avoidable war. It's a clearly avoidable war. I mean, sure. And it could be ended today if it like the options are available. It's just they're just not being used. Like this situation with the conflict.
Blinken could stop it this evening. He could tell.
Absolutely. Yeah.
His attack dog, Netanyahu, to come to heel, or there'll be no more dog food. There'll be no more protection. He could do it right now.
Exactly. So it's clearly an avoidable war. It's inevitable because, of people standing on positions that are, that don't represent the body of the people involved, the majority of the people involved, It's clearly an avoidable war. Yeah, and it could be
avoidable, but inevitable. It is, on the face of it, a contradiction, but it is, I think, an ineluctable one. Thanks for that call from Massachusetts. Gary Tate says, sunken hulks in the Suez, sunken carriers on the bottom of the Mediterranean will change the world. And Ram Hasib says, Mr. Galloway, God bless you and your family. Great monologue. And yes, I believe we're witnessing the fall of the American empire and an end of bullying sanctions, which will soon be no more. My wife and I listen to on Spotify to a short history of. It's politically very bad on many, many things. But in terms of dates and times and historiography, it's quite useful. I'm intending to start my own, which will be that, but politically better. But we listen to it a lot. And one of the things that has impacted upon me, which I already knew, but was in danger of forgetting, is how many empires there have been. And all of them have fallen. They have an arc from their beginning, through their high point, through their decline, until their end. It would be absurd to imagine that this empire that we are currently living through its decline and beginning to glimpse its end, it would be absurd to imagine that that empire, alone of all empires, would grow and grow. Gaze upon my works, ye mighty, and despair will say the plinth, the last remaining bit of the great statue of modern day Ozymandias. Erobos, one of our best scholars, he's a legend, you know. He's in New York and he wants to talk about Iran. Erobos, welcome.
Greetings and salutations, Mr. Galloway, to you, your family, the MOATS audience, and the MOATS staff. I would have to say that upon first glance, I didn't recognize you, for you are as dark as I am. I thought that you were my uncle doing a George Galloway impression. In other words, you look fantastic.
Thank you, bro. It's very, very hot here, man.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, you know, you're right up there where I am, fully melanated. You look amazing.
Thank you.
I would say that tonight's poll segues exactly with my view on Iran's delay. As far as the poll goes, I've been waiting for that poll for quite some time, and I would flesh it out to say that anywhere the United Snakes of America's government is, war is inevitable. You cannot make peace with someone who's constantly attacking, constantly on the attack and on the offensive. You know, heaven forbid it, and may the universe despair if people showed up to your residence and, you know, just start attacking your house and you go out to speak with them and then they double down and quintuple down. There's nothing you can do but fight these people or move. And if you don't have the option of moving because it's your country, it's your home, it means you have to fight them with everything you have. The delay from Iran, I've watched some analysts that said that Russia has loaned them or given them the S-400 system. And from the speculation, the analysts were saying that there are no Iranian, not too many or none, are the technicians that control the satellite interpretational data that Scott Ritter often talks about to the S-400, which is a anti-airplane, anti-air defense. They're the best in the world, or one of the best in the world. So those would have to be operated by Russian technicians, and it's taken time to interpret the data and get all the proper placements of these S-400s, among other technical matters. So I don't know if that's true, but it sounded like a reasonable argument to me, because they know that they're going in. This is going to be a war, and you know, at the risk of being redundant, because it's that important, we cannot make peace with someone who's always on the attack. It just doesn't work. It's an impossible situation, and I just wanted to share those thoughts with thee and thine.
And you did eloquently, as always. And moreover, if you cannot show that you have deterrence, then the bully will never leave you alone. I've told the story before, but there was a guy called Brian, used to spit on me every single day on the path leading up to my house after we all got off the school bus. And I was always walking up there with a then young girl called Linda. And every day he would spit on me as he ran by, until one day I could take no more. And I launched myself at him. I could still feel his eyes. If you've never had your finger in somebody's eyes, you've no idea what that feels like. I can still feel his gums. If you've never had your hand in someone's mouth, gouging, or as Kamala Harris would say, gauging, into their mouth, inside their cheeks. And I gave him, Brian, such a beating that Linda feared for his life. But I'll tell you what, he never, ever spat on me again. Ever. In fact, he'd take the long way round just to avoid having to come past me. Thanks, Brian. It was a very important lesson for me of always standing up to bullies. So, Emmanuel Wood says all wars are avoidable, but none of the players in the Middle East are trying to avoid it. And Doc Alfar says Blinken could also stop torturing us with his crap guitar playing, but I doubt that's going to happen either. Olaf's Dottir says Blinky is going through a tough menopause. Give the gal a break. On the line in England, in Corby, is Terry on Garland and Blair. On you go, Tell. What is it?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. It's nice to see you looking, I would think, somewhere in the George Melly tribute band this evening. It's very sartorial indeed, I must say.
Thank you. Thank you.
My point is echoed by Blinken when he said,
his line's disappeared. Let's try and get him back. We'll go. Is he back, Terence? Not just yet. You can't handle the truth. I love that handle. Says, biggest news, GG, you should cover is over 185 countries are going to join the BRICS payment clearing system by October this year, the alternative to SWIFT. That's huge news. Huge news if true, and I very much hope that it is. Harvey Tadman says, Mark Smith, a British Foreign Office official who worked on counter-terrorism, has resigned in protest at arms sales to Israel, saying the UK government may be complicit in war crimes. We're trying to get Mark Smith on the mother of all talk shows. If anyone knows how we can reach him, then please let us know. We're very, very keen to talk to him. Although maybe he's seen my David Kelly movie and had carefully, as a prophylactic, moved far away outside of the UK before releasing his resignation. Stuart says there are over 5 million podcasts worldwide, and for MOATS to be so popular globally should tell people something. I'm a massive fan of George and Gayatri and, of course, MOATS. Thank you, Stuart. God bless you. Now, Terry is back on the line. Terence in Corby. We couldn't hear you for a moment. Please continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galloway. I was just mentioning your sartorial elegance to a George Melly tribute band, and then I went on to discuss Garland Nixon's point, which elucidates, quite frankly, alongside with you, the totally Potemkin politicians, the pygmies like the Lammys, who are going to Israel to get their orders off Blinken. But in the background, children are being mutilated all over the world. Niger is still fighting to get out of France. There's lots going on. But the British and all the so-called democratic countries are being fed utter tosh. And you did say you were going to give me an update on Mr. Ritter. How's he doing, Mr. Galloway?
I'm not actually yet in a position to do it. When I am, I will. But he's still talking on his own platforms. We can't take him onto ours at the moment because I think I can be honest and blow the gaff. YouTube have taken off all MOATS episodes off their platform, which involve Scott Ritter or Jackson Hinkle, which is an absolute abuse of technical power. It is not something that we can accept, and therefore we're having a meeting with Council this week to discuss how we respond to it. We're not prepared to allow Google to tell us what guests we can have on our show. That would be an acceptance of dictatorial and unwarranted, unworthy power by what is, after all, only a platform. The views expressed on here are either mine or our guests. They are subject to the law. Should anyone, including me, break the law in what we say, they are subject to the so-called marketplace, which Google supposedly supports, whereby 1,000 flowers can bloom, 100 schools of thought can contend, and let the people pick the flowers that are most fragrant to them. That's the system, isn't it, that they are supposed to believe in? But no, behind the scenes, silently, without announcement, and probably hoping I will not announce it, they have effectively banned Scott Ritter and Jackson Hinkle from appearing on our show on YouTube. So we are going to try and find a solution to that. And if we cannot find a solution to it, well, it'll be war between us and YouTube, which is owned by Google. Thanks, Terence. E. Walker says, thinking of your monologue, how did the polio pathogen get into the polluted water in the first place? Yes, a good question to which I have no answer. DP7 says, twinkle, twinkle, Jackson Hinkle, you are a superstar. The YouTube mafia have said no more. They think you've gone too far. Let's go to John in London on immigration. Go ahead, John.
Hello, George. I love your hat, by the way. And
Thank you, my friend.
Cheers. I've just been thinking, and I apologize in advance for possibly, perhaps putting you on the spot a little bit, but and I pose these thoughts as somebody who volunteered to campaign for the party in Lancashire, and I had these concerns before the election, and I had a feeling that the results were going to be what they were, because it's very I suppose brave to an extent that you recognize that mass immigration is driven by wars, and that ultimately people ought to be repatriated, and the conditions and so on need to be laid to facilitate that. But I feel like it doesn't fully address the concerns of people who are not happy with like the exponentially rising levels of immigration, and they don't fully understand all of the international conditions that give rise to it, and they don't necessarily feel like they have a duty to go about understanding it and wrapping their head around all the complexities of international politics. They just know that they want their country to be, to culturally sort of resemble what their country nominally is. And I suppose it puts you to some extent in an inconvenient spot, given, where you found the most political strength and the demographics and so on. But, I don't know.
Any spot. No, John, it doesn't put me in any spot at all. And even if it did, you think I would change my answer because it put me in a spot? And where you imagine my demographic support comes from, you think I'm one of these people that says things because they're popular or says things because they're profitable. I say things because I believe that they are right. And if I was the last man standing believing that they were right, I would continue to say them. You misunderstand me, and you also confuse two things. The issue of immigration and the issue of refugees are not the same thing. And neither of them is the same thing as color or race or ethnicity. These are all different things. Marcus Rashford is British, whether you like it or not. He's not an immigrant. He's definitely not a refugee. He's a black English man. He's a black British citizen. I used to be a white one. Now I'm doing my best to look as brown, as melanated, as Erebus called it. So if you're here to talk about color, you've come to the wrong place. I don't hold with all that stuff. I don't care about someone's color. Neither do I care about their ethnicity, because my ethnicity is not the same as yours. You're English, I'm not. I'm of Scottish and Irish background, with a great-grandmother who emigrated from the United States, from New York. So your ethnicity and my ethnicity are not the same. Right at this moment, even our color is not the same. And then you brought up culture. Well, my culture and yours are not the same. I'll warrant. You probably drink alcohol. I never have. You may have tried recreational drugs. I never have. You may gamble. I never do. You may go with other women. I do not. You may swing both ways. I do not. You may be gay. I'm straight. You may be a Protestant. I'm a Catholic. You may be a Hindu. I'm not. My culture is not your culture. What you listen to is not what I listen to. How you dress is not how I dress. And I'm going to tell you something else. I was born and grew up before there was mass immigration. And Britain was lousy. It was lousy. A night out was sausage, egg and chips, tea, bread and butter in a cafeteria. Before curry arrived, before chicken chop suey arrived, before UB40 started throbbing multicultural vibes, before Elvis began shaking his black hips on the Ed Sullivan Show, Britain's hit parade was Helen Shapiro and Billy Fury. All these things changed. That was our culture then. It is not our culture now. And it is not what our culture will be in 50 years, 70 years from now. Culture changes. Everyone's culture is different. Some people culturally believe that we can abort unborn babies up until birth. I do not. Some people culturally believe that old people should be shuffled off because they're becoming a burden. Give them a glass of wine, a Netflix show, and put an injection in their arm in a clinic somewhere. That's not my culture. Everybody's culture is different. There's always been a culture war. Elvis was taken off the television, forbidden to be shown below the waist. You see me? All these culture wars have always raged. You just know about them more now. Now, I'm against mass immigration. Nothing to do with color or race, ethnicity or culture. It's about economics. I'm the leader of a workers' party. Do the maths. If far more workers arrive, the price of labor goes down. It's my job to put the price of labor up. It's my job to get the workers here in Britain a better, not a worse deal. The only people who are in favor of mass immigration are lunatic liberals, anarchists, and rich monopoly capitalists. That's obvious, isn't it? So I'm against mass immigration because in a capitalist society, that can only worsen the terms and conditions of my members, of the working class that I try to represent and champion. But I have an additional reason for opposing mass immigration. And that additional reason is my solidarity with the countries from which the mass immigration has come. I want Syria to be great again. I don't want all the Syrians to come to Britain. I want Eritrea to be great. I don't want all the Eritreans to come to Britain. I want Mauritania. I just spoke to a man from Michigan where I'm going with my good wife next month. He was telling me from the southern border all the way to Michigan have come a very large number of Mauritanians. And they're everywhere working for cash only, and less cash than the blue-collar workers in Michigan have gotten used to earning through their union cards and their working-class solidarity. So it doesn't put me in any spot at all. I'm against mass immigration for the reasons I have stated. I'll fight my corner in the culture wars for the reasons I have stated. And lastly, the question of refugees, which is not the same as immigration, which is not rising exponentially. Even the refugees are not rising exponentially, at least not in Britain. 500 crossed the channel yesterday. I'm against it. I'm against illegal crossings into Britain, organized by Albanian criminal gangs. Why would I be in favor of that? Not least because the risk of losing your old mother over the side are exceedingly high in the treacherous waters of the English Channel. But every country has to take its share of refugees. And in the case of Britain, we actually disproportionately created many of these refugees. Why are there Syrian refugees? Because our country in the United States caused, waged, funded, armed a civil war in Syria to overthrow the government in Damascus. So Britain and the United States have more of a responsibility to take refugees. And every country has to take its fair share. Actually, Britain's share is vanishingly small compared to Germany, or Greece, or Italy, or Spain. We take far fewer than any of those countries, when in fact we should be taking a greater share because of our responsibility in the wars that produced the refugee flow. But I want all the refugees to be able to return to their own countries and to rebuild their own countries. And I'd rather spend money on helping them return and rebuild their own countries than on a hotelier at £80 a night for many years to come in Blighty, where they live miserable lives, unable to work, unable to study, just waiting for a decision from a dysfunctional Home Office in the United Kingdom. You got me so that I missed 9 whole minutes of the second hour of the show. Please forgive me and let me take a quick break. We've got Arnold August coming up next. If you want to join me on Have It Out with Galloway, you can be the audience member on that video wall so that I can see as well as hear you. Come and have it out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, my other show, Have It Out with Galloway, is going great guns. Take a look. So there it is, haveitoutwithgalloway.com if you want to come on the show. Now, is a Middle East war inevitable? Yes or no? 28,000 have now voted, and, well, pretty overwhelmingly, people say yes. But my next guest is in a position to know. He's an expert on the region and on the military political circumstances in which we now find ourselves. He's an exceedingly successful and popular analyst with his own platforms, but he's agreed to come on ours. He is Arnold August, journalist and author. Arnold, I'm much obliged to you. I'll cut to the chase. Is Blinken up to any good in Tel Aviv right now? And is he going to produce anything out of his hat?
I don't think that Blinken is up to anything good in Tel Aviv. I think that this desperate attempt by the United States to try to give the impression that the United States, that has been funding the Israeli Nazi regime all this time, is really interested in peace in the Middle East. I think, in my view, that what is happening now is very much connected to the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, which is going to start tomorrow, Monday, in Chicago, because even though the Biden administration or Kamala Harris would never admit it, but the position of their government is not popular at all amongst the broad population, and specifically within the realm of the Democratic Party base. And so before the elections take place, I believe that the United States is desperately trying to give the impression to the world and to the United States that it is interested in peace. They do not support Israel and all that. Now, I don't think, like, it was interesting that it's gone pretty far, George. I mean, I read in the Haaretz newspaper today that given this contradiction between, on the one hand, Blinken and Biden and Harris, on the one hand, trying to force a ceasefire onto Israel, there's actually talk now, believe it or not, that the Biden administration is thinking about carrying out sanctions against the most radical right-wing members of the Netanyahu government. So when is it going to be, if Netanyahu was so interested in peace, why did he have to say today that Hamas has backtracked, which is not the case? In fact, it is Hamas who is upholding the tentative agreements that were agreed to in the past, and Netanyahu has been, changing the goalposts along the way. I don't think that Netanyahu is interested at all in peace. I think everyone here, yourself, all our listeners, we want peace in Gaza. We want the killing to stop, the genocide to stop. But in a realistic manner, irrespective of what happens in the coming weeks and days regarding this latest so-called attempt at a ceasefire, in my view, the only solution is really a military solution. That is the defeat of the Israeli Zionist regime on the battleground. And I think it's not unrealistic, because who would have thought, on October 7th, all the way, back then, that Hamas not only has not been defeated, despite the billions of dollars that the United States has funneled into Israel, and despite all of the very nefarious propaganda that you are very aware of, George, that the anti-Israel movement, for example, in Canada, United States, and around the world, is anti-Semitic, a major important lie. However, despite all these lies, and despite the military hardware, the Israel and the United States have not been able to suppress the resistance of the Palestinian people. On the contrary, it has become stronger. And now, as we speak, because of these contradictions, I believe that a new important situation on the international scale is building up with regards to Israel. And that is, China, of course, was not happy at all, to say the least, when Israel assassinated the leader of Hamas in Lebanon. I'm sorry, in Iran, because it was that very leader who just a short time before that assassination, he was in Beijing working out the Beijing agreement with all the other factions led by China. So this was, what Israel did was in fact a slap in the face against China. And when you mess with China, you got a problem on your hands, right? Not only that, linked to what is happening with regards to China, there was a recent meeting in Tehran of an important security leader of Russia, as well as an important security leader of Iran in Tehran, to work out a common agreement on how to continue the resistance against Israel. So the basic conclusion, I hope that there's a peace agreement. Everyone wants it. You would have to be out of your mind not to want it. However, it is not realistic, because whatever Netanyahu says, the entire Israeli society is based on the notion of eliminating the Palestinian people. Even those who are demonstrating regularly every weekend in Tel Aviv for the return of their relatives. I watched those demonstrations religiously. Sorry, no pun intended. Every week on TV. I've never seen any of the spokespersons of this movement in Tel Aviv, so-called pro-democracy movement in Tel Aviv against Netanyahu. I've never seen any of them express even 1 ounce of sympathy, empathy for what is happening against the Palestinian people under the leadership of their own regime. So the whole Israeli society is infected with this notion that it has to be, Israel has every right to establish itself, and on the basis of eliminating the Palestinian people.
Well, of course, Netanyahu doesn't want peace. Right. The question is, are the American government ready for all-out war? Because that's what will happen, Arnold. It won't just be a retaliation of a new type from the resistance from Iran. It will presumably be of such quantity as well as difference in quality that Netanyahu will have his own interests in responding to the response. Iran and its allies then respond to the response to the response. And the balloon goes up. And the potential of all these global players being involved in a hot war against each other, are the American government really ready for that, do you think?
I don't think at this time, in the context of the DNC convention, which is taking place in a few days, I do not think that the American government wants a war in the Middle East. Not that it goes against any of their principles, on the contrary, but it does not serve their interests at this time for the United States to have a war in the Middle East. Now, this may change after the elections, I don't know. But in any case, I think that everything is very much linked to the DNC, even on the issue of Ukraine. It's a similar situation where, in my view, why did Zelensky launch that very adventurous action into Russia, which we now see today, after several days, they're actually losing it, because he is fearful, I believe, that Trump may win the elections, and Trump's view is perhaps to reduce the amount of armaments that goes to Ukraine, not on the basis of any principle, as we know, but because of his own outlook in terms of having, spending money to make America great again. So I think that it's a moving target, with regards to Israel, with regards to Ukraine, but the United States does definitely not want a war at this time in the Middle East. And that's why we have such a sharp contradiction between, on the one hand, the American government and Israel, something that we would never have dreamed about way back in October, where to the extent that they're actually talking about imposing personal sanctions on some of the members of the Netanyahu government.
It has been 10 months that shook the world, no pun intended, now into the 11th month. But if the Democrats make that marginal tacking to refusing visas to Ben Gvir, who doesn't want to go to the United States in any case, Trump will shift ground and attack the Democrats for not supporting Israel strongly enough, blindly enough, not arming them enough. Therefore, the fundamental problem, Arnold, is that the American people either don't care or are sympathetic enough to Israel that there's votes in being the most pro-Israel politician on the block. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're right with regards to your evaluation of Trump, but it's pretty contradictory. He said that, what you just quoted, but he also said that the killing has to stop, the war has to stop, there has to be peace. So it's pretty contradictory. We don't know exactly how we will go if he is elected. But with regards to the sentiment, I would say that, being very familiar with the situation in Canada and the United States, in my own town of Montreal, my alma mater, McGill, those movements that were carried out by the youth in the United States and Canada, as well as England, Scotland, and many places in Europe, these movements were and are still very important. And even though the status quo in the United States will never admit it, it shook the very foundations of the U.S. imperial project. Within their own country, people have said the unbelievable. We are against Israel. It's a genocidal state. It's a fascist state. It's a Nazi state. They did this with a lot of guts. And in addition to that, they're trying to keep that narrative alive that the people in the United States are pro-Israel. Okay, just a few days ago, the youth in New York City, I believe, in a very courageous manner, disrupted the meeting that was taking place between, on the one hand, Kamala Harris and her advisors in a New York City restaurant. They actually attacked the restaurant. They interrupted the restaurant and destroyed their whole meeting. But I noticed, perhaps it's different in England, I don't know, but in Canada and the United States, they never showed what happened. I just found out about it by the social media. But they kept that out of the news in order to maintain their narrative that everyone in the United States is pro-Israel. What a lie. It's the contrary. Even the polls show that the majority of people...
Of course, the number of people who are opposed to Israel has never been higher. I'm in a position to say that authoritatively because I was involved in it when you could fit everybody in one hall that was openly supporting the PLO. So, of course, but we mustn't confuse the dozens with the hundreds with the thousands with the millions. And of course, I'm with the brave people who disrupted Harris's lunch. And of course, I'm with the hundreds of thousands sometimes that are on the demonstrations. But they are not millions. They are not tens of millions. They are not scores of millions. The only reason why there can be a Dutch auction in the US political system as to who is the greater supporter of Israel can only be because they think there's votes in it. It's not because they love Israelis or love Jews. You should go to their golf clubs. You won't find many. It's a Dutch auction because there's profit to be had, electoral profit, and even some financial profit. That's the truth of it, isn't it, Arnold?
Yes, I think you're right. One should not, while highlighting as we do and supporting the heroic actions over many months by the young people in the United States, Canada, and other capitalist countries. They are quite small in number. I mean, even compared to, for example, in my time in 1968, when we opposed the war in Vietnam, that was massive. That was literally in the thousands, if not the millions. It was a massive movement, and it was beyond the youth as well. Now, the important thing as well, when we talk about resistance, of course, we like to highlight and applaud the youth. But in my view, the most important thing in this whole struggle is the resistance of the Palestinian people, the heroic Palestinian people. They are the ones who've kept the notion of Palestine and its rights alive all of this time. And we have to especially admire them, salute them. At the same time, it is within this context that you have movements in the capitalist countries to support Palestine. But, there are many ways, as a bit of a joke perhaps, to increase this, support for Palestine. It's sort of a joke. I've been watching these sparring going on between Piers Morgan on the one hand saying, you condemn Hamas, and others going on a show saying, no, I do not condemn Hamas, and then saying, look how great I am. I did not agree with Piers Morgan not to condemn Hamas. I'm sorry. The issue is not to condemn or not Hamas. The issue is, like if I was on his program, I would say, not only do not condemn Hamas, Mr. Morgan, but I support Hamas as a legitimate liberation movement coming out of the Palestinian people and in their just struggle against Israel. I think that type of thing would help in the long run, even though it might, ruffle some feathers amongst people on the left. But I think that, it may have been in October, November, justifiable to say, oh, I do not condemn Hamas. Great. But the situation has changed so much, George, since that time. And now the issue is we have to go on the offensive and say we support Hamas. We support Hezbollah. We support the axis of resistance against Israel. So irrespective of what happens with regards to these negotiations in Qatar, irrespective, that we know in the long run the issue has to be settled on the battlefield.
Arnold August, journalist and author and broadcaster for that matter, thanks for being with us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a quick break and then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media review, and you don't want to miss that. Quick break, I'll be right back.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. This type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Manchester, where David wants to talk about empires. On you go, David.
Evening, George. I'm actually in Switzerland on a camping holiday, but I am from the blue side of Manchester. Yeah, you're doing God's work, George. I'm proud to post leaflets for you in Rochdale Hill. But I have to disagree with.
Thank you, bro.
With what the last chat was saying. I tend to agree more with what the lady guest you had on I think it was on Wednesday, and she was saying America wants to go to war with Iran. And that's what I believe. You're always talking about the change that's going to happen with BRICS and how everything's rising in the East. And I think the only way that can be stopped, I don't know if you agree, is if there was a war to break out in the Middle East, which would disrupt the world economy. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, George. Well, I do believe now that Iran...
Yeah, go on.
I do believe that Iran, well, obviously, they got not allied with, but they're taking advice from Russia and China. And they are showing, they've been provoked by on lots of occasions by Israel into causing, being led into war. But I think they showed restraint, and I don't think that they will. I don't think there will be a Middle Eastern war because I think that they know. Yeah. America
first of all, enjoy Switzerland. I watched your team today. They were quite impressive without one or two of their top players. Quite impressive. And I predicted the scoreline. So I won a couple of guineas from my sons on Manchester City this very day. We had a sweepstake on what the score might be. I don't want war because I hate it, because I've seen it up close and personal. I've seen it. I've been under bombardment. I've been bombed from the sky. I've been shelled from the land. I've walked in the canyons of horror that war produces. So I could never say that I want a war. I would like to triumph. With the enemy laying down its arms and recognizing the inevitable change that has to occur in the world. But the world doesn't care about what I want. There are forces in motion which are unaffected by me and by you, and which seem ineluctably leading towards the wider Middle East war that you say that you want. I don't want it, but that doesn't mean it isn't going to happen. If I was voting in this poll this evening, I would have voted yes, not because I want war, but because I believe that one is inevitable. And it is made inevitable not by the Palestinians or the Syrians or the Lebanese or the Iranians or the Yemenis or the Iraqis. It is made inevitable by the conduct of empire and the conduct of the savage attack dog of empire, otherwise known as Israel. That conduct, as Erobus said earlier, of being constantly on the attack, constantly killing other people, can only produce resistance, and that resistance will reach a critical mass, and that critical mass will explode, and it will explode to the detriment of the empire. Of that, I have no doubt. So we'll get the same outcome with different wishes, yours and mine, David. So enjoy the rest of your holiday, and I'll see you at Old Trafford. It's going to be different from now on. Ken is in California, wants to talk about American interference. Let's hear what he means by that. Ken in California, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I have a great respect for all the British people who've read Thomas Paine. Very important. Like, America wouldn't exist without Thomas Paine.
He was a great man, no doubt. I'm sure he would still have existed, but he was a great man, no doubt.
Yeah. Like, I truly wish that America would just stop messing around in other countries, because, like, it's a real problem. Like, the American people are suffering. Like Governor Newsom here in California, he sits here and he's he's messing with the homeless. But hey, we got $20 billion to give to Israel to go bomb Palestinians. This is a real issue, and it's a real problem, and it's very upsetting.
I can tell you're upset. You're right to be upset. It's a pity more Americans were not upset, and if they were, the politicians would have to behave differently. As it is, they can take the money of the Israeli lobby, they can recycle the American taxpayers' money to Israel or to Zelensky in Ukraine. Far more has gone to Zelensky and the Ukraine than has gone to Israel. You've sent hundreds of billions of US taxpayer dollars to Zelensky and the war in Ukraine, while your own country is crumbling and falling apart at the seams. Lim K says the US public are not doing enough to stop its government from bad actions. In fact, more of relenting and ignoring its warmongering. And Tom McTeague says it's kind of like an empire has run out of victims and is feeding on its own subjects or something like that. John is in New York, wants to talk about Iran. Go ahead, John.
Hi, George. I'm proud to say I'm a student in the university, and I'm asking this question, student to teacher, a keen observer of your interview with Professor Morandi. And similar to the situation in Israel, it does not take a lot of research, very little in fact, to see the level of our interference in Iran beginning 75 years ago with the installation of a murderous dictator and then granting exile to that same dictator to live out the rest of his days in comfort. It is clear to me that there is a history here, and I guess my question to your screener is, how long is long ago? I mean, it's only 75 years. Is that too long a time that we should forget all that has happened that has led us up to this point, in your opinion?
Well, a very good question, John. And in a way, it wouldn't matter whether we thought it was too long or not. The point is, it's not too long ago for the Iranians. And the Operation Mongoose was a US-UK operation. And it overthrew the democratically elected socialist prime minister of Iran. Long before it was an Islamic republic, it had a socialist prime minister called Dr. Mossadegh, and he was overthrown by the United States and the United Kingdom. There were others involved, but we were the two main players. In fact, a relative of Teddy Roosevelt was the chief operator in Operation Mongoose, which created a coup d'etat and brought down the government of Iran for no other reason than that the Prime Minister Mossadegh had announced his intention to nationalize the petroleum and oil oceans in his own country and take ownership from the British and American oil corporations. It's an old story. It's happened everywhere. Every time a independent government came to power and began to expropriate the foreign-owned corporations that exploited the resources of that newly independent country, the empire struck back, and the power of empire was used to overthrow or murder the leader who was coming to power with these intentions. Mossadegh survived, though some of his ministers were hanged. I knew the widow of one of them. The body of Patrice Lumumba, who was overthrown for exactly the same set of reasons in the Congo, was mutilated as well as murdered. His tooth was only very recently returned from Belgium. And the same players, UK, US, in that case Belgium, were involved in the overthrow and murder of the leader who tried to come to power and take control of his country's resources in the interests of the people of his country rather than the people of yours and mine. It's a common old story. But the people of the Congo have never forgotten it, even if most people in Britain and the US have never heard of Patrice Lumumba. The people of Iran have never forgotten what happened at the hands of the empire in the 1950s. It wasn't 75 years, by the way, it was 1953, I think. It was a year before I was born. So I was still an embryo when that crime was being committed. So whether we have forgotten or whether we have never known doesn't matter a damn, because the people that lived under our empire, on which the sun never set because God would never trust us in the dark, they have never forgotten and will always remember. It was Operation Ajax, not Mongoose, I'm told. I thought it was Mongoose. John, thanks for the call. Michael is in Cyprus on oil and Israel. What's not to love? Go ahead, Michael.
Hello, Jules. Looking good, mate. Looking good.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm in Cyprus, and I believe, and I know for sure, that it's the Americans started the war in 1974 with the CIA in Cyprus. That's for starters. Yeah. The Americans now are ruling Israel, or Israel is ruling America, but it's the oil and gas that they found underneath Cyprus, and the Israelis and the Americans want the rights to it. That's why they want to clear out Gaza, so they've got the 200-mile rights for the gas and oil. And that is all it's about.
But it will never be legal. Yeah, but it will never be legal for them to do that, Michael. And that legal will never change because Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights are legally occupied territory. They are militarily occupied by Israel. The legal position is that Israel must withdraw from them. And that was recently reiterated by the International Court of Justice at The Hague. So even if they cleared every last remaining Palestinian from Gaza, the oil and gas would still not belong to Israel. Israel could still not legally harvest it, and the international oil companies could still not legally profit from it. Now, some may try, but I don't think in any case that's going to happen, because they will not clear every last Palestinian from Gaza, and the resistance in Gaza will never end. It will never be defeated, and it will never end. And therefore, they will never be able to harvest that illegally occupied oil and gas. Cyprus is another question, and you're absolutely right about that. Hoz is in London on Iran. Hoz, welcome to the show.
George, thank you very much. When I say it's on Iran, it's actually on Iranian food. So are you ready?
Aha, now you're talking. Now you're talking, yes.
So what is your favorite? Is it Orma Sabzi or Fesenjun, George?
It's Fesenjan, I call it, but my pronunciation is Scottish working class pronunciation. Fesenjan.
Okay, done. Okay, Mum's going to make it for you. That's it, you're done. That's all it was. There's a light-hearted bit, and you look absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you, my dear. Now you're running to be a councillor Where? In Harrow Road, I read.
I am, George.
What are the boundaries of the Harrow Road ward?
So mostly it's just slightly north of the Harrow Road as it's going up past from the Bayswater area. So it's Sutherland Avenue, Elgin Avenue.
So 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, Elgin.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Those are the ones. I went there and got my signature
I have a lot of friends there.
Well. I can't wait to see you tomorrow,
I have a lot
George,
of friends there. And there's a fabulous Iranian restaurant on Harrow Road, Behesht. Do you know it?
Yes, I do. It's an awesome. No, he's not going to go to Kish. Mum is saying, tell you to go to Kish.
I am Iranian, I know.
She's Iranian, she knows, George.
Okay. Give her my love. I look forward to eating her cooking. Thank you, Hoz. Now, my good wife, from a mystery foreign location, joins me now. She stays out of the sun. She bought an umbrella today to stay out of the sun. That's what Asian people do. Whereas British people, white people, they lie out in the sun to become brown. And then some of them hate on brown people who are the color that they go on holiday to become. It's funny, I know. Forgive us, Gayatri. What's happening?
Yes, it's very funny. The grass is always greener on the other side, isn't it? You look wonderfully tanned, and I am unseen by the sun.
Pale.
I wanted to
pale
start
and porcelain.
I wanted to start off with some breaking news, which Death in Manchester emailed about. He says, reports are coming in on Telegram channels of a bombing attack in Tel Aviv. Multiple deaths. Hamas formally rejects ceasefire proposals. No doubt another excuse to hit Iran. And this is indeed half an hour ago or so. There was a car bombing in Tel Aviv, and the driver died in the explosion. I don't know about the multiple deaths that Death talks about. Lots is still unclear about it, so I think we shall see how this develops.
That's interesting, but I mean, car bombs are not the norm, not the modus operandi of any of the resistance organizations around. But obviously, we need to see that story develop. Anything else?
Right. So in regards to the poll, whether it's likely or not, Reginald Dekisnoy says, connect the dots. Middle East, Ukraine, Taiwan, the Sahel, Africa, Latin America, the same hand behind all of these conflicts. Just a preparation for the big bang against China, the Atlantis nightmare. Well, that would definitely be a nightmare. Don't know who would dare to start that big one against China.
Well, that's right. I mean, you and I are here making a new film for China on the hypocrisy and the corruption of the Western leaders, not least towards China. But I know these tropes are common, and I know many people agree with them. Many people close to us agree with them. But I don't, you see. The US cannot handle a war with China. China would whip their ass. China and Russia together are an item. China and Russia cannot be defeated by the United States and the Netherlands, or the United States and Belgium, or the United States and the UK. So it is not in their interest to have an all-out global nuclear World War III. And so I continue to believe that at some stage, somebody will take the weapon out of their hands. Wiser counsel will take the trigger, take the nuclear button out of their hands. I continue to believe that. I'm sorry, I'm going on and interrupting you, and that's never a good idea. Go ahead. Any more?
Yeah, I was going to say that we just had the 3rd anniversary of the Taliban, of course, them parading the Americans leaving after 2 decades. And I remember the message that came in last week of Napoleon not managing to defeat Russia, Hitler not managing to do so. So I don't know what the West is up to, America and the UK in particular. Tim says, I think everything depends on Iran, who I also think are playing a blinder. The West keeps saying tonight is the night, but then nothing happens. They will strike back, but at a time of their own choosing. And how they choose. They have so far made the West look like fools for sending war machines to the Middle East and costing them billions. But when they do, then it will kick off. That is from Tim in regards to the poll. This one, because you earlier spoke about UFOs, and I know that you are really into this. Scott Thompson says, George, this is a great suit you're wearing, but oh dear, I'm afraid you're way behind the times regarding your comments on UFOs and UAPs. You need to look up laser-induced plasma and aerogel, whatever that may be. These systems are used with stealth aircraft to create decoys. It is possible with lasers to create a ball of plasma in the air that can be manipulated. So we shall look into that later after the show.
Well, that went right over my head, but then it would if it was fast-moving plasma out there in the atmosphere. I take the same view as our brilliant American guest, Garland Nixon, earlier this evening, that it's simply not logical to believe that of all of the billions, if not trillions, if not infinite number of planets in the world and the multiple universes that we already, with our relatively primitive level of scientific knowledge and ability, we know to exist, it would be simply not logical if the only place that life existed or had ever existed was this little place here. It's much more likely to be true that there has been and therefore is other intelligent life out there. If it is really intelligent, I've no wonder that it doesn't even dream of coming here, because this asylum is ruled by the lunatics and may be about to destroy all the beauty on this earth. Last one from you, Gayatri.
Yes, the aliens would be smart to stay far away from planet Earth, indeed. Finally, from Nader.
Far away.
Nader wishes you a belated happy birthday and then asks, where are the 1.4 billion Arabs hiding? I watched a little Palestinian girl crying, saying, where are the Muslim Arabs? She said she will never forgive them, and she will ask her God not to forgive them too. And this reminds me of the story that you shared a long time ago of having the same encounter with this little girl, asking, where are the Arabs? Where are the Muslim Arabs? Where are they?
Where is this ummah they teach us about in school? That little girl said to me.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a melancholy state of affairs, and I can only take some consolation from the fact that it will not last forever. And I hope one day that I will see the change in the political military weakness and powerlessness, paralysis of Muslim and Arab countries. But don't forget that the Palestinian resistance are Arabs. The Lebanese resistance are Arabs. Most of them are Muslim. The Iranians are Muslims. The Iraqis, mainly Muslims. the Yemenis, Arabs and Muslims. So it isn't the case that there are no Arabs and no Muslims standing up for that little girl in Gaza. The problem is not enough, and the problem is that those with the power to change things are not interested in doing so, for whatever reason. And they're not all the same reason. There are Muslim countries that talk loudly about how appalling this situation is and how unacceptable it is, but they never do anything to change it. And there are other Muslim countries, Arab countries, that openly cavort with, they belly dance for the Israeli enemy. And there are still others that are embarrassed about it and will never announce it, but are nonetheless collaborating with these great crimes. But one day, all of that will change. I'll tell you what's just changed, Gayatri. 30,000 have now voted in this poll, and roughly speaking, about 73 or 74% of them say that a Middle East war is inevitable, and who knows, may already have begun. Yep. I'll take you out for the local equivalent of chips after the show, which is very, very soon. So get your coat on. Paul Meany says, GG, the entire civilized world has flashbacks of the Nazi atrocities of World War II committed against those deemed subhuman, in the same way that the brute Netanyahu dehumanized Palestinians as subhuman animals, Amaleks. Well said, Paul. Powerful words indeed. And Gunni, 1972, says, the moment we get politically savvy, they'll force us into a situation where we need to be combat savvy. I hope not. I'm too old for combat. Well, we crossed the 30,000 barrier, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you who voted, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you who watched and will watch. Millions do every week without fail. Millions watch the mother of all talk shows, and others, the distilled version is their a cup of tea. The podcast that we do is now reaching places that you could never have imagined, and in very significant numbers too. So the show is growing and growing and growing, and that's because there's a need for it. It's also because it's good, but it's mainly because there's a need for it. For never has the disjuncture between the need and the ability or willingness of the so-called mainstream media to cover what's actually really going on. It has become laughable, actually, that big stories are simply not reported at all. The Foreign Office official in Britain who resigned his high-powered diplomatic post, condemning the British government, successive British governments, for breaking international law, breaking British law, in continuing to sell weapons to Netanyahu, knowing that Netanyahu is, with these weapons, committing crimes under British law and international law. That's a big story. In any era, that would have been a story. They'd make a movie, The Railway Children, about this brave diplomat who blew the whistle to the detriment of his own career, about crimes being committed by the government in which he worked. But that story, that resignation, has not once been reported or broadcast anywhere in Britain. Nowhere. Not on television, not on radio, not in the newspapers. They're making a fool of themselves. Because those who wish to know already know. Even before I told you. They knew from their telephone, from social media. Everybody who wants to know already knows it. And by being so openly in a conspiracy with the state to suppress important news, interesting and important news, the media is committing harikiri. It's committing suicide in front of our eyes. Soon the day will come when no tree will be felled to produce discredited and unread newspapers in Britain and in the United States and elsewhere. The day will come when no one will pay a television license to be lied to by the BBC. The day will come when no one will want to listen to the babble of fools that is the vast majority of mainstream media output. Now, ignorance is a choice. All of you have a choice to remain ignorant or to seek out the truth. That's what you've done, and I thank you. I'm told that we are number 1 podcast in Bahrain, number 18 in Mexico, in the top 30 in Russia, Peru, Croatia, and in the top 10 in Oman. I'm very proud of this show, as will be obvious. I'm very proud of you for continuing to support it. The fastest way that you can support this show is to follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. If you do that, you'll get lots of content that you don't get here ordinarily, and you're about to get even more of that exclusive content. So please, it's the price of a cup of tea per week in an insalubrious cafe. If you think I'm worth it, well, please follow me there, patreon.com/George Galloway. Donate the price of a cup of tea per week, and you'll keep the mother of all talk shows on the road. Well, I'm about to take my missus out for the local equivalent of chips. Whatever you're going to do for the rest of the night, I hope that you enjoy it. I could stay here forever, you know. I can even watch the Premier League, and not on Sky either. Work that one out. It's been marvelous. Thanks for being here.